I was fluffing pillows and arranging fresh daisies in the guest room when my phone buzzed. It was from my son. "You're not coming on the cruise. Karen doesn't want to babysit an old lady." The words burned through me before the phone even slipped from my hand. It hit the hardwood floor with a crack across the screen, but that shattered phone was the least of Daniel Carter's problems. I stood in the same room he once called his sanctuary, remembering the nights he'd begged me to keep the door cracked, the smell of cookies wafting from the kitchen, the promises that it would always be us against the world. And yet here I was, 62 years old, suddenly uninvited from a trip I'd been planning for weeks. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had mailed me a card covered in palm trees and bright ocean water. "Mum, Karen and I want you to join us on a Caribbean cruise this summer, our treat." I'd cried when I read it. I hadn't traveled since my honeymoon 40 years ago.
The moment I said yes, I began living like a teenager again. I bought cruise clothes, applied for my first passport, even treated myself to a pedicure. I stayed up late imagining conversations with Karen, hoping this trip would finally bridge the polite but distant wall between us. And now, bags packed, neighbor ready to water my garden, mail arranged, all undone with a single text. I walked to the window overlooking the backyard. The old swing set was still there, rusted but solid. Daniel had spent hours on that swing, talking about becoming an engineer, building houses that lasted forever. But this was no boy dreaming on a swing. This was a man who'd built a family with no room for the woman who made his dreams possible. Something inside me shifted. It wasn't grief. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity.
I didn't cry that night. I didn't even rage. Instead, I poured a glass of iced tea, sat at the oak desk Mike had once used to balance our bills, and pulled open the bottom drawer. The deed to the Willow Lane house lay there, crisp and undeniable. The house Daniel and Karen thought was theirs, the house I'd bought as a wedding gift, the house they decorated, hosted barbecues in, bragged about on Christmas cards. But here was the truth. I had never signed it over. My name, and only my name, was on that paper. I'd structured the gift carefully years ago with my attorney, leaving conditions attached that no one but me seemed to remember. Respect and care for the gift giver. My safeguard. That text from Daniel had just obliterated the condition. The phone rang again. "Daniel, I picked up this time." "Mum, I got your voicemail." "Look, about the cruise." Karen thought it would be more romantic if it was just the two of us. It wasn't personal.
"Daniel," I interrupted, voice even, "we need to talk about Willow Lane." Silence, like a stretched wire. Finally, "What about it?" "That's our house. You gave it to us. I let you live in it. There's a difference." In the background, I heard Karen's sharp voice, demanding, dismissive. "What's she saying?" "Tell her she's confused. Tell her we're busy packing." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "When you return from your cruise, you'll have documents to review." "Enjoy the Mediterranean, Daniel. Don't worry about me." I hung up before he could reply. The die was cast. And for the first time in years, I felt not like someone's forgotten mother, but like a woman with choices. By Friday morning, Patricia Wells, my realtor, was planting a bright red for sale sign into the Willow Lane lawn.
From my porch, 2 streets over, I watched through binoculars. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel and Karen thought they'd left me behind for a cruise, and here I was, setting fire to their illusion of ownership. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Missed calls stacked up like dominoes. Messages too. "Mom, you're making a mistake. Please call me back." Karen sick with worry. "We're cutting the cruise short. Cancel this now." I ignored them all. Patricia's voice that afternoon was calm and steady. 3 offers already, Linda. All above asking. 1 buyer wants to close in 10 days. Cash. Take the best offer, I told her. And yes, 10 days is perfect. I could picture it already. Daniel and Karen landing at Cleveland Hopkins, rolling their luggage across familiar tile floors, driving home exhausted, only to find strangers measuring curtains and a sold sticker plastered across their front yard. That wasn't spite, that was justice.
Back inside my kitchen, I sipped coffee and stared at my own packed suitcase by the door. For weeks, I'd been preparing for a trip I was no longer welcome on. Now, a different kind of voyage awaited. Vermont in the fall. The inn I'd read about in Yankee magazine. Maple leaves, covered bridges, fresh air that didn't carry the weight of anyone else's expectations. The house on Willow Lane wasn't a loss. It was fuel, and the fire it lit inside me was long overdue. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for Daniel to choose me. I was choosing myself. Margaret Caldwell, my attorney, arrived at the house with a bottle of champagne. She had been with me 5 years earlier when we drew up the original deed, structuring it not as an outright transfer, but as a conditional gift. She settled into Mike's old leather chair, reviewing the paperwork spread across my dining table. "Linda," she said, "in 30 years of law, I've never seen such elegant consequences." I smiled faintly. Not revenge. Just cause and effect. Margaret adjusted her glasses. "You're even protecting them, you know. Every mortgage payment, every tax bill they covered, you're reimbursing them through the sale proceeds. You're not taking their money. You're taking back your freedom." That word, freedom, landed heavy and sweet. "Let them think it's revenge," I said. "They need to feel the sting. But I won't let them be ruined." Margaret raised her glass. "To new beginnings." After she left, I lingered in Mike's study, staring at the photos still on the wall. Him in his hard hat, Daniel in a baseball uniform, me holding their hands at a county fair. For years, I'd defined myself as someone's wife, someone's mother, and when those roles shrank, so did I. But now I had cash, a pension, and no more illusions. The phone buzzed again. Daniel, this time from Barcelona. His voice cracked on the voicemail. "Mom, please, don't do this. We'll pay rent if we have to. Just don't sell the house." I deleted the message. This wasn't cruelty. This was a lesson, and sometimes lessons have to hurt to matter. The Maple Hill Inn sat at the top of a winding dirt road, framed by golden trees and the smell of wood smoke. When I pulled into the gravel lot, I felt like I was stepping into someone else's postcard. Sarah, the innkeeper, greeted me at the door. She was about my age, silver hair pulled into a braid, flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves. She'd once been a corporate lawyer in Boston, she told me, but after a divorce, she sold everything and bought this place. "You'd be surprised how many people end up here after life kicks them in the teeth," she said with a grin, sliding a mug of cider across the counter. That night, I lay in a quilted bed, listening to crickets. For the first time since Mike died, I didn't feel trapped by silence. I felt held by it. The next morning, Sarah and I hiked up to a lookout point where the mountains rolled like waves of red and gold. "You don't look broken," she said, squinting at me. "You look like somebody finally figuring out she gets to write her own second act." Her words stayed with me. I was 62. Too late for a career change. Too late for romance, probably. But not too late for myself. Back at the inn, I pulled out my laptop. On impulse, I booked a flight to Dublin. A month earlier, I'd been begging to tag along on someone else's trip. Now I was building my own. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I was giving one to myself.
Ireland was everything I didn't know I needed. Green fields rolling forever, cobblestone streets lined with pubs spilling laughter into the night, strangers who talked to me like I wasn't invisible. I hiked cliffs along the wild Atlantic Way. I sipped Guinness in a Dublin pub, tapping my foot to fiddles and bodrans. And every day I felt a little less like a discarded mother and more like a woman alive. Then the letter came. It was waiting for me at the inn's front desk, forwarded from Margaret, my attorney. The words made my hands tremble. Daniel had filed a lawsuit against me, claiming elder abuse, claiming I wasn't competent to make financial decisions, demanding the house money back. And worse, Karen had filed for divorce. In her petition, she accused Daniel of hiding $80,000 in gambling debts she said he'd racked up during their marriage. I sank into the inn's lobby chair, letter shaking in my lap. My son, the boy I'd once held through chickenpox and high school heartbreak, had turned me into his enemy in a courtroom. And yet, beneath the sting, another truth took shape. The cruel text wasn't just cruelty. It was desperation. Daniel hadn't wanted me on that cruise because he couldn't afford me. He couldn't even afford himself. I folded the letter back into its envelope, the cider in my stomach turning bitter. Ireland had awakened me, but Ohio was calling me back. Not because I owed Daniel, but because the story wasn't over yet. Back in Ohio, Margaret ushered me into her office with a look that froze me before she even spoke. Two men in dark suits sat waiting. They weren't bankers, they weren't creditors. "Mrs. Carter," one said, flashing a badge. "I'm Agent Miller with the FBI. We need to talk about your son." My breath hitched. They laid it out plainly. Daniel's gambling wasn't just debt. It was tied to an illegal betting ring that laundered money through legitimate businesses. He was in deep. Too deep to climb out with loans or family handouts. "If you cover his debts," Agent Miller said, "you could be complicit. They're not asking him for repayment. They're pulling him into their operation." I gripped the arm of my chair. "So what's left? Prison? Not if he cooperates. He can work with us to bring down the organization, but it has to be his choice." On the drive home, I replayed everything: the cruise text, the lawsuit, the debt, the lies. My son hadn't just rejected me, he'd dragged me into his drowning spiral. But beneath the anger, I felt something sharper: resolve. For 30 years, I had protected Daniel from scraped knees, bullies, heartbreak. I couldn't protect him from this, but I could make sure he faced it. That night, I called him. "We need to meet tomorrow, public place, no excuses." He tried to deflect. I didn't budge. "Daniel," I said, my voice steel, "if you don't show, you'll lose me for good." Silence, then a quiet, broken, "Okay, Mum." Tomorrow, everything would change. The next afternoon, I slid into a booth at Maple Street Coffee, heart pounding. Daniel was already there, hands wrapped around a cup he hadn't touched. He looked older than 35, tired, frayed. "Mom," he started, eyes pleading, "I need money. Just this once. They'll hurt Karen if I don't pay." "Karen's divorcing you," I said gently. "I saw the papers." His face crumpled. For a moment he was 12 again, the day I told him his father wasn't coming home from the factory, lost, desperate. But I couldn't let that image weaken me. "You don't owe them money, Daniel. You owe them yourself. And if you pay once, you'll be paying forever." He shook his head violently. "You don't understand. These people—"
"I do," I cut in. "The FBI explained it all. They don't want your cash. They want your life." He stared at me like I'd slapped him. "You talked to them?" "Yes. And now you have a choice. Keep sinking or help them take the whole thing down." His lip trembled. "What if I screw it up? What if they kill me?" I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "Then at least you tried to fight back. But if you do nothing, they already own you." Tears blurred his eyes. For once, there was no arrogance, no defensiveness, just a scared man caught in the wreckage of his own making. Finally, he nodded, a tiny, broken nod. "All right, Mom, I'll do it." And just like that, my son's survival hinged on a wire, and a room full of men ready to devour him alive. The unmarked van rattled slightly as I sat wedged between two FBI agents, headphones pressing into my ears. Through the feed, I could hear Daniel's voice.
He was walking toward a black sedan in a parking lot on the east side of Cleveland. His wire picked up every heartbeat, every tremor, in his words. "I've got the cash," he said, holding the briefcase of marked bills. "We're square, right?" The men inside the sedan laughed. A deep, ugly sound. "Nobody's square, engineer," one of them sneered. "You're ours now." "You'll run what we tell you. Casinos, laundromats, construction. Hell, maybe even that pretty little house of yours. That's how it works." My throat tightened. Daniel stammered. I just want this to be over." "Over?" the man mocked. "This doesn't end. You don't quit us." And then, like thunder rolling in, the FBI swarmed. Agents in vests came from every angle, shouting commands, shoving men to the ground, cuffing wrists against cold asphalt. In my headphones, Daniel's ragged breathing cut through. "Mom, it's over?" I pressed my hands together, whispering into the empty van. "It's over, baby. It's over." Hours later, back at the field office, Agent Miller assured me Daniel had done enough. He'd testify, he'd avoid prison, probation, counseling, mandatory restitution, but no chains, no cell. Relief and grief hit me all at once. My son wasn't lost, but he wasn't saved either. He'd have to do that part himself. Daniel writes me letters now, real ones, paper, pen, ink, smudges. He tells me about therapy, about working construction again, about Karen slowly, maybe allowing visits with the kids. I write back, but not every time, because my life no longer revolves around waiting for his next apology. After the sting, I went back to Vermont, then Ireland, then Italy. I stood in Rome's Colosseum, felt the stones under my hands, and realized how small and temporary our mistakes really are. For the first time in 40 years, I'm not just mom or widow. I am Linda Carter. I drink wine in Tuscany. I hike mountains in Vermont. I laugh with strangers in pubs, buy scarves I don't need, sit in silence without feeling lonely. Daniel once called me a burden. The truth? I was the one carrying him all along. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to carry them anymore. If you're reading this or watching this or just listening, hear me clearly. It's never too late to take your life back. Not at 62, not at 72, not ever. So here's my question to you. What second chance are you ready to take?